Waiting at the Alhambra Police Department in custody was Phil Spector.
I knew from the phone call from my lieutenant that he was a very wealthy music producer.
Me personally, I had never heard of him.
Spector's style is often credited with changing how we hear pop music.
This case was going to be what I call red ball. A case that's going to draw a lot of attention, and you have to recognize that going in. And I think we all did.
The LA County Sheriff's Department is the best of the best.
Some of the highest profile cases are tried in Los Angeles.
You have to be dedicated 110%.
This is murder. There's no more serious crime.
It boils down to a passion and a sense of duty.
Justice comes from finding the truth.
There's something special and different about celebrity cases. And it's always been Los Angeles that seems to be the epicenter of those types of cases. Everybody thinks of Los Angeles and they think of Hollywood. Hollywood and actors and directors and producers, there's so much more to it than that. However, that is sort of the heartbeat of this city.
You know, LA is a funny place, and the LA County Sheriffs serve the entire county from the worst poverty imaginable in America to the greatest wealth in America, the $100 million oceanfront estates. We police all of that. So it's quite a variety.
My ultimate goal was homicide. And I was fortunate enough in 1999 to make it. At the time, my children were 7 and 9. People were saying they're too young because it is a lot of hours and there's always something to do. But we worked around our family life. Now, if that meant right after we're going back in the office at 10 o'clock at night to get it done, then that's what we were gonna do. My partner Paul Fournier and I were about to get off call when we received a message from the desk that we were being assigned a case in a mansion in Alhambra. And the only information we had that a woman was found dead and a music producer was involved.
I was a bit surprised that there was this large palatial property there in this kind of small town that's really just a suburb of downtown Los Angeles.
Alhambra is a Sleepy Hollow. It's a middle-class, single-family residence. And now you have this monstrosity, if you will, in the middle of nowhere. So as we got closer, we saw a large crowd behind yellow crime scene tape. And I remember Paul looking at me and said, "Okay, put on your big boy pants."
A female had been shot inside of the residence. The victim has been pronounced dead at the location.
When I got there, it was an absolute zoo that, you know, the news copters were up above and news vans up and down the street.
When we arrived on scene, we first talked to the Alhambra police officers. And let me explain how it works. The Sheriff's Department covers a large area of LA County. And in that county, you have smaller municipalities. They have their own police department. However, they don't have the resources that the Sheriff's Department has. There are 100 homicide detectives in the LA County Sheriff's Department. So they will reach out to us and we will assume responsibility for the case. Alhambra police officers told me that they had received a 911 phone call from Phil Spector's chauffeur. When they arrived, they could see Phil Spector walking back and forth on the upstairs window. They were trying to get his attention, they were trying to get him to come downstairs, and the guy's not complying. He's not coming out. They entered the home where they confronted Phil Spector. He's not cooperative. You see a woman slumped over in a chair, obviously dead. Phil is ranting, this is the most devastating thing I've ever seen.
And one of the officers had the whole thing recorded.
This is absolute fucking nonsense. I don't know what that fucking lady, what her problem is, but she wasn't a security at the House of Booze, and I don't know what her fucking problem was, but she certainly had no right to come to my fucking castle, blow her fucking head open. What the fuck is wrong with you people?
They have to tase him. I believe they even used a ballistic shield to knock him down.
The Alhambra officers conducted a very preliminary investigation, and based on that investigation, they took Mr. Phil Spector into custody.
I've been around long enough to know that people take death in a myriad of ways. You have to take into account everything. You have to keep an open mind. And based on what Spector is saying, suicide is a possibility. Back door was open. As we enter in, I see a young lady. She's sprawled out in a chair in the foyer. There's a .38 caliber handgun by her foot. You can see she was suffering from a gunshot wound inside of her mouth. We didn't know who she was. We didn't know if they had a relationship. Maybe something was sideways. Is this a crime? Is this a suicide? Could this be a horrible accident? A three-pronged investigation.
We treat all death investigations on the surface at first glance as if they're a murder. We send homicide cops out to every suicide that occurs in the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles County Sheriff. Every accidental death, with the exception of a traffic collision, we send a homicide cop out there.
I'm starting to look at the paraphernalia in Mr. Spector's home, and I'm starting to grasp the importance of this person in that industry.
Phil Spector's fame as a producer at times eclipsed the artists he worked with.
You see Tina Turner, you see pictures of the Righteous Brothers, you see the Beatles, the Grammy nominations, and all the awards that he had gotten over the years. As the lead investigator, if this thing works out well, kudos to you. But if it goes sideways, you are held responsible. We assigned Mark Lowenfield, one of the most seasoned detectives at Homicide, to do the scene, because we knew that was going to be a critical part in this whole investigation.
Big cases and Mark Lowenfield kind of go hand in hand.
High-profile cases can stress cops out, and I couldn't have cared less. We put the same amount of effort and resources and diligence into every murder scene. The house was in horrible shape. It was poorly lit. It was filthy. And there were mice and rats and roaches. And for somebody of such extreme wealth, it was like a little bit out of character. You would think he would live this extravagant lifestyle.
There was everything in that house. I mean, literally, it like he was a multi-millionaire pack rat. You're like, you know I need to make sure that I don't miss something, but you're also like, Spector probably hasn't been in this room for 6 years. It was the most unique crime scene investigation I'd ever been involved in, and truthfully, one I'd never want to have to do again. It was awful. It was terrible because it was so convoluted.
So we knew we had the decedent remains right there. We had the physical evidence of the blood. We had the gunshot wound that was visible. She had been shot in the mouth, so there were teeth and fragments of teeth that were spread out amongst her remains. They were on the carpeting. They were across the room on a stairway. We collected it. We photographed it. We diagrammed it. We held it for DNA. You got to get past the ick factor and the emotional part of that. You got to get past that. And what do these things tell me?
We're there to speak for the dead, and they leave us clues with physical evidence. All of us knew that when you're standing over a dead person, that's an awesome responsibility to be given, and you have to take it seriously.
You have to take a somewhat spiritual ideology. That's just a shell, and the person's spirit is already gone.
I do think it has an accumulation, being in the presence of death. The job can take its toll.
Now you focus on solving it. And so we just methodically took our time before releasing the scene. Usually you hold a scene maybe, if there's a lot of evidence, maybe 7-8 hours. On this one, we held it over a day.
On the floor was a loaded .38 caliber revolver manufactured by the Colt Firearms Company, and there was one spent cartridge in the cylinder of that weapon. There was mixed in with that a thumb lock device off of the back door to the home. Most people have a deadbolt, and it goes from the door into the frame of the door, and it provides that extra level of security. Well, in order to throw that deadbolt, you twist this thumb device, and that was off of the lock itself, was lying on the floor. It was very unusual. Like, how did that happen?
Some people would say, well, it looks like the gun was placed by her foot. The problem is you could never reenact where a gun would land. You know, gun drops, and it just flops around.
A leather snap holster was in a drawer of the bureau, and it was clear that that leather holster fit the 2-inch Colt Blue Steel .38 caliber revolver, so that weapon came from that holster.
It was about 5 p.m., almost 12 hours later, the coroner's office finally had confirmation of the identity of the victim. This was Lana Clarkson. At that point, we were able to obtain the mother's information, and we were heading over to see Donna.
I got a phone call from Lana's sister, Fawn, and she said, something could have happened to Lana. I don't know, something's wrong. And I said, what do you mean, what's wrong? Fawn got a phone call from somebody, but she didn't really know too much. She said it could have had something to do with the news on the television about a possible murder in Alhambra. Lana was supposed to call me, but I hadn't heard from her. I thought perhaps there'd been a party, you know, and she was being held along with other people as to, you know, for investigations. I ended up calling the sheriff's office.
While we were going to see Donna, she actually connected with my partner, Paul, on the phone.
I thought he was calling me back. And then he said, where could I meet with you? And I was like taken aback, meet with me? And, excuse me. He told me Lana's address on the canal. He says, well, can we meet you there? So then I was really concerned. I didn't know what was happening. That wasn't a good sign. I pulled into the parking garage and trying to keep my, you know, wits about me and not be, you know, too upset, not without knowing anything. So I'm kind of cleaning the car up, and I pulled up a pair of shoes, and I remember holding the shoes saying, this can't be Lana, here's her shoes. Sorry. And then all of a sudden, the detectives pulled in, her sister pulled in, and brother. We all quietly walked around to the front of the cottage, and we went inside, and Detective Fournier just kind of looked down at the floor, and he said, it was Lana. Sorry.
It doesn't matter if that child is an adult or a little kid. I mean, it's just, there's nothing worse and more unnatural than, you know, your children dying before you. And it's a tough, tough thing.
Making a notification of a death of a loved one, unequivocally, absolutely the singular worst part of being a cop. And there's a lot of crappy parts to being a cop. You need to find out everything as critically important as quickly as you can, because it may affect how we collect physical evidence, because me and my partner and the other 8 detectives were still processing the scene.
more you know about a victim, the more likely you are to understand how they died.
These people have to process what you're just telling them. And now I'm going to sit there and ask them too, hey, by the way, she was over at Phil Spector's house. Do you know who Phil Spector is? Does she know who Phil Spector is? Do you know why she would be there? And Donna says, no, she didn't know this man.
In the entertainment industry, everybody socializes after hours. I'm not surprised. Lana was always networking with different people. She had a lot going on. Lana was a working actor.
Well, I got a bus to catch.
You know where to?
Yeah, wherever it's going.
Lana did a lot of TV shows in the 80s. She was in the Barbarian Queen movies. Lana fractured both her wrists, and it was really a big setback for her.
She accidentally fell, and to brace her fall, she ended up breaking both her wrists, and she had to have pins placed in them.
That was, the beginning of a whole year of recovery for her.
We didn't stay long, let them grieve privately. Right after the incident happened, Phil Spector was arrested, and he told the Alhambra officers that he wants an attorney. As soon as he uttered those words, it's hands off. And he immediately posted $1 million bail.
The DA's office attitude was, we're not going to file this case. We're going to wait until everything gets investigated.
During the initial debriefing by the Alhambra police officers, they said they did have one witness, the chauffeur, the person who made the initial 911 call, Adriana D'Souza. So we need to get to that chauffeur.
Detective Paul Fournier.
Detective Richard Tomlin.
And we're here with
Adriana D'Souza.
When we spoke to Adriana D'Souza, he said he probably worked for Phil 10 to 15 times in the past. Adriano said Phil Spector came out 7 o'clock sharp like he normally does, then went to dinner and drinks in West Hollywood. About 1:15, 1:20 in the morning, he was now directed to go to the House of Blues. Later on, the House of Blues is closing, it's a little bit after 2, and Lana is helping a drunk Phil Spector. He said, I believe he was drunk. And she takes him and puts him in the back seat of the car. She gets in, and they drive to Phil Spector's home. Adriano said he was parked around the back of the residence, was playing a little bit of music, he was dozing off, and about 5 in the morning, Adriano said he heard a loud popping noise. It was enough to startle him, it was enough for him to get out of his car, but suddenly the back door opened up, and he saw Phil Spector wearing a white jacket.
I saw his face, and when I saw him, he had a gun in the front.
And Adriano could see there was blood on his hand.
I did like this movement, and I saw the legs. I saw the lady in the chair with the blood on the face.
Spector looked at Adriano and said,
He told me, like, I think I killed somebody.
Adriano felt that his life was in danger, just started running. And he called Phil's manager. It immediately went to voicemail.
You have to come to Mr. Phillips' house. I think he killed a lady. They're gonna call the police right now.
Adriano said, I think Mr. Phil just killed somebody. He hung up the phone, and then he dialed 911, and he told the dispatcher the same thing. In Los Angeles County, it can go as long as a week, week and a half before an autopsy is performed. We're supposed to treat them all the same, but the reality is, it ain't always that way. This thing has gone all the way up to the sheriff himself. They want to know what's going on. This autopsy was done, I want to say, the next day, which was unheard of. The major findings from the autopsy was there was one gunshot wound inside of her mouth. Where the gunshot was and how it was lodged, Lana died instantly. The bullet was in a downward angle. If you committed suicide, Are you going to point the gun downward? It'd be more like it'd be level, or it'd be maybe even an upward angle.
The mode of death is a legal determination left to a medical doctor. And he only has 5 choices: homicide, suicide, accident, natural, unknown. It's the coroner that determines that. Not a judge, not a jury. It's the coroner, the medical examiner, makes that lawful determination. Dr. Pena's very, very thorough to draw those conclusions. Part of it is experience, part of it is common sense, part of it is science.
In this case, Dr. Pena deferred the findings and wanted to wait for all the reports to come back before making a final determination. I am leaning more towards it's a murder or accident. We still do have to develop, though, could it be a suicide? Was she depressed? Was she in financial distress? We talked to her landlords, said she was a model tenant. That threw out that she's struggling and she doesn't have enough money to make ends meet. Anybody and everybody that we thought had some type of relationship with her, whether it was business or personal, we spoke to them.
Everybody has their down in the dumps moments. But basically, she always pulled herself up and she got out of it. And if she really needed something, she could call me.
No one said that she ever tried to hurt herself. No one ever said that she even talked about suicide. She's a positive person who would never think about hurting herself.
In a perfect world, Lana would go straight back to acting, but as she had been out of the scene for a year and she wasn't top of mind for all the casting directors, she had to figure out a way to survive, and this opportunity came at the House of Blues.
Clarkson was working here as a hostess at the House of Blues.
She was excited to be working. She was excited that she had healed and she was healthy. It was a privilege to be asked to be the hostess of the Foundation Room. The Foundation Room at the House of Blues was a very prestigious place. It was the who's who of Hollywood. As a guest of Lana's, I met George Clooney there one night. If you were famous and you were in Hollywood, you were visiting the Foundation Room.
Paul and I went to the House of Blues. We spoke to the manager, the head of security, and then the waitress that actually served Spector. Spector had come in, and Lana was working as the hostess that evening. He said, "Don't you know who I am? I'm Phil Spector." She, not realizing, stated, "Well, Miss Spector, you can't come in." She thought he was a female. That didn't go over too well. And the head of security ran over to her and said, "Hey, no. Pulled her to the side and said, "You treat this guy like gold." So at that point, Lana escorted him over to a special table, apologizing profusely. During the early morning hours, the place is now closed. They were seen leaving together. We asked, was there video footage? We watched the video. It appears that Lana was actually helping Spector into the car. According to Adriano, Spector was drunk. He kept repeatedly inviting her, "Come to my castle, you have to see the castle." And she said, "Okay." And that's how the journey began. It's eerie watching and knowing that this young lady's gonna lose her life within 2 hours.
A lot of our questioning was along the lines of, hey, attractive woman, men are pigs. She's in Hollywood, the home of the term casting couch. How does she react when somebody made an inappropriate remark or somebody did something inappropriate to her?
Lana, she knew how to rebuff attention, and very delicately. It's easy for people to make big leaps and make assumptions about a woman going to a man's home in the middle of the night. But I knew Lana, and I knew exactly why she went to his house. She didn't go because she was interested in him romantically. There wouldn't be anything intimidating about going to have a drink with Phil Spector. He was 5'6" to her 6 feet tall. She took care of herself. I can absolutely see where Lana would be intrigued with somebody like Phil Spector. This is Hollywood. Let me tell you, networking is highly valuable.
I'm the one person that knew both Phil Spector and Lana Clarkson. What an unusual, dubious distinction. It was around 1966 when I first met Phil Spector and witnessed him work. When I was 15, Gold Star Studios was like the big deal. I'd sneak in and I would sit on the couch. This engineer, he invited me into the studio. Eventually, I was in Phil Spector sessions. Phil Spector had the Wall of Sound, and the Wall of Sound was just about having 4 guitar players at once and 3 piano, but nobody did stuff like that. 2 drummers, you know, it's like completely crazy. I never witnessed anybody like him. I mean, just the way that he was in the sessions, the way he behaved. He was like a little dictator in a way, you know, but he sure knew what he wanted, and he got it. Lana was one of my closest friends, but we had never had any occasion to discuss Phil Spector. The last time I saw him was 1978, I think, and I met Lana Clarkson in 1984, before I moved to New York. So Lana had no idea of Phil's reputation. Phil Spector was a very dangerous character, unstable and very unpredictable. Had I been there, when the House of Blues closed that night, this would have never happened, you know. I would have never let her go out and leave there with Phil, you know, but
everybody had a heightened sense of this is going to be a very scrutinized case, and we're going to need as much information as we can. Our lab got the results of the DNA swabs that were obtained during the crime scene investigation.
In the master bedroom, we found a white dinner jacket that Mr. Spector had been wearing during his evening out at the House of Blues. There was blood spatter on the sleeve of the jacket. Also, in the guest bathroom, there was a cotton diaper.
Something I learned, when people have guns, they will wrap them in diapers.
That diaper had blood on it, and it was moist.
And we learned that Lana Clarkson's blood was on that diaper and in that bathroom, that her blood was on Phil Spector's jacket.
When the projectile struck Miss Clarkson and blood came out, it got on Mr. Spector's weapon, it got on his sleeve, it got on his hand. And during her exam of the diaper and her exam of the weapon, Dr. Lynn Harold was able to conclude that the diaper had been used to wipe the gun down. And that's where the moisture and the blood evidence was transferred from the weapon to the diaper.
Bloodstain pattern evidence is going to end up being circumstantial evidence of the actual crime. How did the gun go off? Where was the gun when it went off? What effect did the gun going off have? It was incredibly difficult because we're dealing with bloodstain pattern evidence on dark red carpet.
When all these findings came back, suicide is out of the window. Did we believe it's a murder? Could there be an inkling that it's an accident? Yeah, but the problem with that is he's not saying that.
I don't know what that fucking lady, what her problem is. Just blows her fucking head open in my fucking house.
The coroner's office finally did come back and say, no, this was a homicide.
The medical examiners determined that Lana Clarkson was murdered, but the LA County DA's office declined to file homicide charges.
The LA Coroner's Office made this announcement. Not only did they say it was a homicide, they fingered Phil Spector. But when are we going to hear from the LA District Attorney?
Spector's big, and it's big for this DA's office who has lost so many high-profile cases.
I remember When the Spector case came along, I knew who Phil Spector was. Who's lost that loving feeling? My granddaughter loves that music from Top Gun. There was I don't want to say paranoia, but the office got burned very badly in the O.J. Simpson case. We wanted more time to file criminal charges against Simpson. But there was a lot of pressure from the media, and we had to file the case. Well, what happened in the O.J. Simpson case, we weren't ready.
You want to make sure justice is served and they're going to do their time. Now you're focusing on how can we strengthen, prove that it is a murder without a reasonable doubt, and what could be any hiccups to stop us from getting that conviction. Everybody wanted a piece of the media attention.
It's sad, but it's the nature of our media. They're going to follow cases that have a lot of flair and interest.
Phil Spector liked to talk. He was giving interviews left and right.
In a magazine interview, he claimed Clarkson, quote, kissed the gun.
He fabricated the information, and then he just was fairly hostile, about Lana, and he was maligning her all the time.
Phil Spector's PR machine, they were out to make Lana look like a bimbo.
People put her down because she's a B-movie actress, but she held that proudly. She knew that she was a big barbarian queen, and she owned it.
The family requested that none of us, the intimate circle, speak to anybody.
People would say something and they would twist it, and it would be published in a magazine or a newspaper. So I had said the best thing is not to speak out.
And so we were just in the background, quietly fuming over the information that was being spewed forth by Phil Spector and his team. It was horrible.
It showed what he was about. You can't but help say, well, no, you're trying to hide something and you have committed murder. Without a doubt, this was the most media-driven case. My friends or relatives, that's all they can talk about. Hey, are you on that case? And everybody's got their theory. But you have to have balance. And one of the things that I do, I rarely talk about what I do for a living. I don't feel special. This is just what I choose to do, and I enjoy doing it. And on this case, I was low-keying it, just like, oh yeah, working on this. Oh yeah, it's gonna be on TV. And at the time, my kids were 13 and 11. And so my kids knew what was going on, but I think they took a cue from me. And they never, I always laugh, they were never too impressed with me.
I heard Spector read him described in the newspaper this morning as being 90% charming, 10% trouble.
Yeah.
Did you have any experience with that 10% of him?
I never did, certainly, but there were many, many stories.
We're focusing on why did we believe it's a murder? We have to get into the life of Phil Spector. We see there was at least one time where he was arrested with a gun.
He possessed guns, he owned guns. I learned from other people he had this long, sordid history of waving guns around. There was story after story after story of him actually waving a gun during the recording of a song by the Ramones.
He's pissed off at John Lennon and he fires a gun into the ceiling. We had to go track that down.
Phil Spector pulling a gun on people has more to do with who's in control. If you have real power, you don't need a gun to influence somebody. He was a chicken shit.
He carried loaded guns for a reason, because he could bully people with them. From John Lennon to Leonard Cohen.
They're getting ready to wrap a music recording session. Phil Spector says to Leonard Cohen, go out and put a vocal on this, will you? And Leonard says to Phil, he says, well, you know what, man, I'm tired. And he said, I could do it tomorrow. And then Phil gets the gun out, points it at Leonard and says, you're gonna go sing this now. It didn't deter Leonard Cohen. This is the first day. Leonard told me the story, right? He was still so intrigued by the possibilities of what would happen by working with Phil, but Leonard knew that that gun was there at all times.
He was very powerful, so people were very hesitant, especially people in that music world. They felt that he had enough power to derail their career. During this, there was a lot of people we spoke to that would not go on the record, but they spoke of how he would keep people in his house. It was men and women. You had a good time with Phil and you wanted to leave, and he would say, okay, just wait right here. And it was always in that foyer area. And he literally would disappear at times for hours until he was ready for you to go. And how he would keep them in, remember the deadbolt lock that was found on the floor? He would remove the lock, and now they're stuck.
It was another opportunity for him to control others, and that was what set him apart.
He was manic, if you will, about control.
Ms. Clarkson was basically imprisoned. She wasn't free to leave on her own will because she couldn't open the damn door because Mr. Spector had taken that lever device, that thumb device, off of the deadbolt on the door.
We had heard rumors, but rumors don't float in a courtroom. So we had to have hard evidence. Rich Tomlin and his team tracked down every single lead, and they turned these rumors into fact. We found actual witnesses, a bunch of them.
Sometimes it would be a one-date relationship. Sometimes it'd be women that he knew for years. But all of these women had the signature in common of having been held hostage, having been deprived of their liberty by Mr. Spector.
You have these women saying how he was very charming, conscious to their needs, very appealing, a great conversationalist. And then the switch would go off.
Phil Spector had a habit of bringing women over to his house, wanting sexual favors from them, and when they didn't comply or satisfy him, he would pull out a gun.
That's an MO, and it means that this is a thing that he does, that he has done. And the reason that's important is because if you didn't find anyone that ever said this happened before, that would probably be a pretty big defense point. Say, that's absurd to think that my client would do that, right? These women were willing to testify that they were in fear of their lives, that they thought he was going to kill them. It's a critical piece of the evidence, and it's a big part in showing that there was intent. It certainly wasn't a suicide, but it wasn't an accident either. He had these aggressive tendencies, and sooner or later, this was going to be the outcome.
If you base it on talking to people who had historically gone through this, I think he didn't want her to leave. He left her in that foyer area for an hour or more. She was dozing off, and for whatever reason, we'll never know, he grabbed that gun and he decided to shove it in her mouth, and she panicked and he kills her. Realizing what he'd done, Phil Spector has more than enough time to now try to stage the crime scene. We were in continual contact with the district attorney's office. It was a collaborative effort. November of 2003, the decision was made and murder charges were actually filed against Phil Spector.
In early court appearances, he had famed OJ attorney Robert Shapiro at his side. Now he's on his third set of high-profile lawyers.
One thing with Phil Spector, he didn't want to spend one day in prison. Every time there was a new defense attorney, there was a continuance, and the judge would have to give them time to get up to speed. Phil Spector is on bail, meaning he is out. He had gotten married. As long as he can stretch this case out, he's a free man. It was kind of a circus atmosphere you had.
Phil Spector would wear different wigs to the trial. He had his huge bodyguards.
The defense in this case, some of their conduct was incredibly egregious. One of the defense attorneys, who's a complete and total unethical scumbag, New York mafia attorney, he like hit me up in the hallway and in the restroom, like followed me in there, like, boy, I can't wait to get you on the stand. I'm really gonna F you up. Like, really? I'm a little guy. You think I haven't had my ass kicked before? What are you, blind? Look at his face. Look at me, man. I built a career getting my ass kicked. And I'm not the world's greatest testifier, but I can tell the truth, which is pretty goddamn easy to do. Maybe I appeared intimidatable or something, if that's even a goddamn word. I'd like to think that I wasn't.
At stake in this trial was justice for Lana Clarkson and her family. There was a subtext to this trial as well, however. The LA DA's office had not won a high-profile case in 40 years. Even though there was pretty significant evidence that the celebrities were involved in criminal activity, my first year in the district attorney's office was the trial of O.J. Simpson. I was a young, brand spanking new DA. There were enormous lessons that were learned from that trial.
Jurors look at celebrities different. They consider some identity with them. There's a certain amount of sympathy that is built up. And there's a lot of pressure on jurors. They know afterwards they're going to be criticized by their friends if they find some celebrity guilty of something.
We didn't want to try Phil Spector, the music producer. We wanted to try Phil Spector, the man. The fact that he was this massive music producer who had produced fantastic music by anybody's standards, phenomenal music, and changed the course of music as we know it, rock and roll as we know it. It didn't matter. What mattered was what happened inside that mansion on that particular day. My strategy was to reveal the real Phil Spector. Period, full stop. We had close to 20 incidents that we wanted to use. The judge relegated us to 5, which was fine.
There was a gun pointed at my temple.
He took the revolver and smacked me in the side of the head and said,
If you try to leave, I'm going to kill you.
He said, if you leave, I'll blow your head off.
It came out of nowhere. I think he was wearing a plaid jacket because I remember thinking he looked like Elmer Fudd. The gun was bigger than he was.
We went up a stairway to his bedroom. He didn't have to do that, you know. He could have been romantic, but he did it by gunpoint. He wanted to rape me.
Be very careful what you say to me, because nothing you say to me is worth your life. Goodbye, Dorothy.
It was difficult to hear. There were these women bearing their souls, and I really thank them for being able to do that, because that wasn't easy for them to get up there in front of all the cameras of Court TV and you know, all the people and just tell their gut-wrenching stories.
The media said, we want gavel-to-gavel coverage. We knew in the O.J. Simpson case, that was disastrous.
People start acting differently. It becomes a show trial. Instead of presenting evidence, you're presenting performances. So one of the things that we tried to do was to make the witnesses on our side, at least, understand you were there to simply tell the truth. Everything else is a distraction. Just ignore it.
I get nervous when I speak in public. I don't like testifying. It's breaking my balls to come here and talk to you. I knew Mr. Spector had unlimited resources, so he had these very expensive, very proficient, very aggressive attorneys. So I was at a disadvantage. There's a couple of very simple rules in testifying that I live by. Listen to the question, answer the question, shut the hell up. So I go to testify, I'm nervous anyway.
Mark Lillefeld, bless his heart, was on the witness stand. During direct examination, he's asked to describe something about Lana, and he slips and says her paw instead of her hand.
As soon as I said it, I realized I called this woman's hand a paw, like a dog paw. Partly because I was nervous, partly because I'm a fool. And I look in the audience and I can see her mom looking at me. And her mom's got this look of shock and disbelief. You just called my deceased daughter's hand a paw.
I sat there and cringed. Yeah, it was not his finest moment.
He quickly corrected himself. Mark felt devastated. That's the first time I can honestly say I had to talk him off the ledge. He felt so bad.
He's just a canine lover. Has had dogs his whole life.
I was nicknamed after a dog. I dream about dogs. I have some dog issues. And Lana Clarkson's mom, who's the only one that mattered to me, was totally good. I apologized to her.
I remember him coming up to me, and I remember how sweet he was. I was very grateful.
I just spoke to her about, like, it's really an honor to be a part of a homicide investigation where the victim was of such a great character. It was really a pleasure to know about her life and how she touched all these other people's lives.
It took a long time. The trial itself, several months. There was a lot of witnesses. The defense brought in a lot of defense experts from all over the United States. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent.
They were people that were world-renowned in their field of expertise, and they were living proof that if you pay me enough, I will tell you that I am Donald Duck and that the sky is not blue, it's brown.
When you stick to the objective, scientific evidence, it's a suicide.
We weren't just prosecuting a case. We were defending the truth.
The only defense that they could possibly present for how a gun went off in her mouth was to say she did it.
We knew that the defense was going to come after Lana. They had to. They had to create this persona of a person who was deeply depressed and, had one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, and she just had nothing to live for. They had played and introduced a video.
I'll be no man's slave and no man's whore.
Phil Spector's wife at the time sat behind the defense team, and she started giggling out loud and laughing at Lana.
You officers can be so resourceful.
Not with Lana, at Lana. The defense did that on purpose to mock her and to suggest that she was a lesser person, a lesser actor who didn't have anything to live for and had no career aspirations or opportunities. I knew that it hurt Donna and the family.
Well, I mean, when your good friend gets murdered and gets smeared in the process and all the rest of it, I mean, and you're listening to this stuff go on in court where they're presenting these stories about her, that's painful because it's not true.
I was so frustrated because I felt like I couldn't protect her and protect her reputation in a way that she deserved to be protected.
In California, defense lawyers for Phil Spector have rested their case.
You meet 12 people you've never met before and they've never met each other. I mean, it's hard to get people to agree on what color the sky is, right? So I never take for granted that anything's a slam dunk, but I knew that we had marshaled the right evidence. I knew that we had the right blueprint for the trial. I knew that the witnesses, all of the women who testified, Adriana D'Souza, everybody did what they were supposed to do. And I thought, this shouldn't be that difficult. The jurors have all of the tools they need. That was on day one. My confidence started getting shaky on day two. And then that went into day three.
Initially, it's going to take a few days just because they have to go through every piece of evidence. But then after that,
day 5, day 7, day 8, day 9, and by that time I'm a wreck, thinking, what did I do wrong? How could this be taking this long?
When the jury foreman took an initial poll, it was disheartening. We were so far apart. There was 4 guilty, 5 not guilty, 4 undecided. It's almost like a second trial that happened during deliberations. Some of us in the jury room had to relitigate for the jurors that either didn't get it or actually fell for the misinformation that the experts on the defense side were giving. I guess if they repeat a lie in different ways and often, it almost becomes fact. It was the longest, most, painful experience I've ever been. We all had to do our job on the evidence presented to us. This is the come to Jesus moment for all of us. I mean, I knew how serious it was. I mean, I was being honest and why I had to convict. It'd been so contentious to the end that we just needed to get out of there. We deliberated for 14 days. This has been going way too long. I went and hit the buzzer. That was it.
This time I will find that the jury is unable to arrive at a verdict and declare a mistrial in this matter.
I thought it'd be a done deal, in and out. And it wasn't. I was insulted by the defense and the stuff that they threw. And I think I've said enough.
As the gavel hit the bench, my stomach dropped and I thought, I failed. Everybody did what they were supposed to do, and I felt like I was the one that didn't, that wasn't able to see it through. And it was a very defeating moment in my career. I went upstairs, I started packing up my briefcase for the evening. I wanted the press, quite frankly, to clear out a little bit. And there was a lone reporter who stayed back with a microphone and a camera. And as I walked out to my car, she said, "Mr. Jackson, do you intend to retry this case?" And I stopped in my tracks and I looked at her and I said, "I will try this case as many times as it takes to get justice." And I kept walking. We weren't going to stop because of a hung jury. It was never going to happen. So we gathered our thoughts, put the case back together, and about a year and a half later, we tried it again. In the first trial, out of 12 jurors, 10 of them voted for guilt. So ultimately, I came to the conclusion that we had not done anything wrong. Let's just pick a new jury and put this case on, basically blueprinted the same way the second time. And that's what we did.
I didn't know what to expect in the second trial. It wasn't as much of a spectacle, but both trials were just as emotional for me.
The jury was in deliberation. And I remember I was at my son's high school baseball game. When this case came out, he was 11. My son's 16 now. My phone is blowing up. Hey, they've come to a verdict. And I just sat there. And I thought about it. I'm always going to have other trials, other verdicts. And on the selfish side, I'm not always going to have the opportunity to see my son play baseball. And so I said, no, I'll watch it on TV.
I had my son on one side, my daughter on the other. We were just sitting there holding our breath.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Philip Spector, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder of Lana Clarkson.
When they said guilty, it was just like I could breathe, I just, couldn't believe, finally, we have a verdict that was true.
Families pleased that the jury rejected the distortion and trashing of Lana Clarkson's life, which was a part of this trial. The past trial has been going on now for 6 years.
No matter your fame or your wealth or your supposed celebrity, you will stand trial and you will be accountable for your actions. This was the first celebrity conviction in 40 years. Obviously, that was a very, very big deal for everybody involved. It was nice to know that you could put on a case in Los Angeles against a well-funded, very powerful celebrity and have the satisfaction that the truth was going to come out.
Mr. Spector got 19 years to life. There is not the rehabilitative part of the law, but the punishment part of law. Sit in your cell and think about what you've done. the rest of your fucking life until the day you die, and you're carried out of this prison in a casket.
He's getting exactly what he deserves.
I was gone before the case even went to the first trial. I left the job with PTSD. I was wound too tight for the job, honestly.
Danny retired somewhat young.
I think that Mark is the one that said one time, everyone's got their number of bodies. That number is different for everyone, but at some point, you've had your fill, you're done.
This job, it's a magnificent, wonderful job, and it's been great to me and my family, but it's a very, very debilitating job. It is emotionally dangerous.
I've got friends who have committed suicide. I have other friends who have drank themselves to death, and it wasn't called suicide, but that's exactly what it was. And there's more law enforcement suicides every year than there are line of duty deaths. You know, it's significant. You know, to do it as long as Mark did it, you have to be like Mark, where you really can let things glance off of you.
When he raped and killed his neighbor, Sigrid Weber, in Ariens and Moselle, Alexander Pasternak was 35 years old, and he was still living with his mother. He was the village's saint, the brave municipal gardener, whom we can always count on, the one who wouldn't hurt a fly. The day after the crime, here he is in custody in front of the police of the search section of Metz. Alexander Pasternak is a character. When you see him, he seems handsome, jovial, very nice, a very simple gentleman. And finally, when you dig and you see the impulses he animates, the fantasies he has, he's someone who's really cold in the back, actually. Stephanie Lemahu, Chief of the Gendarmerie. I have been a behavioral analyst at the Department of Behavioral Sciences of the National Gendarmerie for more than 20 years now. This department has two main types of missions, which are the analysis of particularly violent crime scenes, and also help with the preparation and assistance of security guards, for security guards where the suspects are difficult. We were two from the same department, and in fact, we have a depot of sound and image without recording, and we can see and hear what's going on. Mr. Pasternak is a not very tall individual, a little handsome, with a jovial look. He doesn't have a threatening face or physique. On the other hand, indeed, we see that intellectually, he is a little bit limited. A few years ago, we might have said, the village's bunny, but he speaks correctly, there is no problem. Our job will be to analyze his behavior in relation to his CV, to his life journey, to analyze the flaws, what potentially caused him to commit the crime, and why. For example, Mr. Pasternak had told us that he didn't have a partner, that he had never managed to have a girlfriend or a partner, and yet he had tried. Knowing that Mrs. Weber had been found naked, with traces of sexual violence, it was an indication for us regarding the motive of the homicide and the passage to the lake. These are things that we take into account, and then we will discuss, during the break, with the investigators, on the best way to use what he told us in his previous hearings, to move forward in the most relevant way possible. Code B47, Investigation Report of Personality of Eve Durand, the mother of Alexander Pasternak, qualifies his son as kind, helpful, and always ready to serve. He is not very clever and constantly doubts his actions. I realized that he was sick, but I refused to accept it. During his first hearing, he is very firm. He is even very vindictive, in the sense that he declares that he has nothing to do with it, that indeed he saw him from afar that night, and that in no case is it him. We don't have someone to stress, to worry about at that time. Moreover, the investigators of the ICR de Metz regularly ask him if he is okay, if he feels good and everything, and he answers with the affirmative. At the first hearing, we have nothing. On the other hand, we are confident for the rest, due to his behavior during the neighborhood investigation. That is to say that he was shaking. He could not even hold his glass of water. He was very, very stressed by the presence of the gendarmes at his home. He had injuries to the elbows and knees, because on the day of the facts, of the disappearance of Mrs. Weber, he had run, and especially what he told us, that he had felt unwell, that he had fainted, that he had got up, that he had the short at the level of the knees. All this put us very confident for the future. Investigation report of personality of Eve Durand. Alexander Pasternak appeared to us as a man with a somewhat mysterious personality. He told us very clearly that he felt inhabited at times, without being able to define this phenomenon, which seems to surpass him and to which it is difficult for him to resist. During the second hearing, the investigators placed him on the crime scene. Mr. Pasternak began to feel a little stuck, and at that moment he recognized having crossed the victim, having spoken to him. The investigators insist on the fact that he spoke to Mrs. Weber, that he had lied. And there, Mr. Pasternak does something that in my career I had never seen. That is to say that at that moment, his jaw creaks, his eyes change, his voice changes, and he says that now it is no longer Alexander who will speak, but it is David. That Alexander is a fool, and that it is David who will speak now and speak with the investigators. Now it's not Alex who's going to talk. Alex is going to take a break. I'm trying to reassure him. It will be a look. Alex is so stupid that he can't figure it out on his own. It's infeasible. I even had to force him to look at his grandfather and gnaw a chicken. It's hard to analyze if he makes cinema or if he invented another personality to recognize the facts, because it's too hard for Alexander to recognize. We were very scared for our colleagues because they say schizophrenia and crisis means the risk of an extremely violent act compared to my colleagues who were in the watchtower with him. We, in the room next door, with hindsight, there are things we can see that our colleagues don't necessarily see when they are in the room with the watchtower. They have to type at the same time, think about their questions, and we see exactly what's going on compared to the behavior of the watchtower. We saw with my colleague the jaws creaking, the gaze changing, the intonation of the voice that was completely different. At that moment, we said to ourselves that we absolutely had to stop the watchtower and let him go back down under pressure, calm down, relax, rest, and we would see the next day in what condition he was. If it was David we had with us the next morning in the watchtower, or if it was Alexander Pasternak. The next day, when we resume what will be the third hearing, Mr. Pasternak is completely normal, inclined to speak, does not refer to David, as if nothing had happened the day before. He is not particularly stressed, he is not particularly. So we found Mr. Alexander Pasternak at that time of the hearing. So he continues at that time to tell us that he met him, that he saw him, that he spoke to him, but that he did nothing to him until the moment when we had received the DNA results in the meantime, which showed that the DNA on the clothes and the DNA present on the victim's body was the DNA of Mr. Alexander Pasternak. So the investigators already asked him if he knows what DNA is, because everyone does not know what DNA is and on which support we find it. So Mr. Pasternak, giving us the impression of being a little bit limited intellectually, asks him what DNA is. He says it's what's on his hands. So my colleagues, investigators, explain to him what DNA is. And from the moment we tell him that it is unique to a single person, he actually recognizes the homicide facts on Mrs. Weber. The investigators speak of an ordinary man, no judicial background, no psychiatric background, but a fragile personality. These explanations remain vague about the reasons for his action. In the state, there is certainly a sexual connotation to the aggression. Toxicological and psychiatric analyses should allow us to know more. The presumed author has been put on trial for voluntary homicide. He risks up to 30 years of criminal detention. We'll find out. He's an extremely frustrated teenager. It's the whole problem of his life. His goal for him was to have a sexual relationship. So it was someone who introduced himself who was very shy, very introverted, with a lack of gaze, very emotionally detached, who was in low emotional resonance. He was very cold, very suspicious. You could feel his anxiety. You could feel the human contact provoking anxiety and tension in him. I think he's someone who has always fled social contact. I felt that pretty quickly with him. He was clearly avoiding it. So I tried to put him at ease by explaining who I was. I introduced myself, explaining the mission entrusted to me by the justice. I still had some particular questions, including the danger, the risk of recidivism, the penalty, which was a high-profile question because Mr. Pasternak, in front of the investigators, was talking about a possible double personality, Alexander versus David, who tries to take control from time to time. In fact, it refers to some Hollywood films where we see people who are murderers, sadists who have multiple personalities. So you could ask yourself the question of a mental illness. If that's the case, it could raise the question of discernment, the abolition of discernment. Someone will not be released from prison but more from psychiatry. For Mr. Pasternak Alexander, does he suffer in the name of schizophrenia? The answer is clearly no. I did not find in him any element in favor of schizophrenia. Psychiatric expertise report by Dr. Alexander Barada. They did not find in him any delusional element, no intrapsychic hallucination, no idea of persecution, no megalomaniacal delirium. If he had been schizophrenic, we would have already known it for at least a dozen years at home. Afterwards, we can still do late diagnosis. It happens. In any case, schizophrenia typically starts in adolescence. It is a person who begins to be in retreat, who develops very particular tastes for esotericism, at whom we will progressively have a break with the previous state. We will clearly identify a change. In general, it can be seen. At 35 years old, it could not have remained silent all his life. I dare hope that his mother would have said to herself, "There is a problem, I must consult her." After that, it is still not very credible. It is someone who has a not very high intelligence. I think he must have thought that it would pass. Unfortunately for him, no one believed his story. We are in the context of a very clumsy attempt to escape judicial proceedings. And all this, it goes more into a personality disorder than I have diagnosed. A schizotypical personality characterized by a coldness of affections, a social isolation, thoughts that can be strange. Yes, it is true that it was someone who had a strange, isolated contact. And above all, who can't get into a relationship in a satisfactory way with third parties. When he was arrested, Alexander Pasternak, who was born in 1984, is 35 years old. Master Philippe Quatrebu, lawyer of Alexander Pasternak. He has been living for many years in Ariens. It is a small village not far from Metz, in Moselle. It is his grandmother's family home. He lives there with his mother because his parents are divorced. The father lives a few kilometers further. He does not live very far. He lived there with his grandmother who died a few months before the events. He lives a little bit in Vasclos. He is sure that living always as a family did not encourage him to go to others. He has very few friends. His hobbies are reading, gardening, botany. In any case, he does not practice any sport outside. He does not practice any activity in a club or in a place where he could meet people and be in a relationship with others. When you have this way of life coupled with an introverted personality, with someone who is of an almost sickly shyness, it is certain that social relations with third parties are very complicated for him. Alexander Pasternak's parents separated in 2003 following an attempted suicide of the father. But the parental agreement would have always been satisfactory. His younger brother is described as sociable, living in a couple, but their relationship was distant. They played in the car for 10 minutes and each left on his own. As for the reasons why Alexander Pasternak stayed to live with his mother at the age of 35, he remains evasive, advancing material considerations. There was a search at his house during his interrogation. The search allowed us to see how Mr. Pasternak evolved. He already has a very small room next to his mother's. You have to go through his mother's room to access his. His is so small, it was originally a laundry room. He also lives with his two uncles, 49 and 53 years old at the time of the facts. We have the impression that it is a room for teenagers, for grown-up children. Even during the search, he is so worried that we enter his domain, that we touch his things, his books. He reads a lot, so he has a lot of books. And we see that he is not comfortable with the fact that we touch this little world that he keeps in a laundry room. We realize that Mr. Pasternak, who is an old boy who lives with his mother, his uncles who are a certain age, he has no friends, he has no leisure, he has no girlfriend. And we find albums of classmen, pochettes and classmen with underwears worn by women and photos of women. And we realize that he actually bought underwears worn by women. He is an extremely frustrated teenager. It's the whole problem of his life. He made a lot of effort. In fact, it was his goal. For some, it was studies, a job. For him, it was having a sexual relationship. He also multiplied the registrations on dating websites and libertine websites without any success. It was his problem. All his energy was really devoted to that, to trying to have a relationship. So it's not a mistake to have tried. He first went out to the IBAL, where he was very happy to explain that he had managed to have a flirting relationship with a certain Letitia. And when I asked him if he had kissed her, he looked at me with surprise and perplexity. He didn't know so much if he had kissed this young girl. In any case, he made considerable efforts to have relationships with girls. He multiplied the outings in bars. Every Saturday night, every Friday night. By consuming alcohol to disinhibit himself. He made out. He used to serve as a coach for 2 years, where he did exercises in front of the mirror to try to seduce. So when I asked him if he was happy with this coaching, he told me yes. I even managed to have a 06. Only afterwards, this young girl who gave him his number was probably not the right one because she didn't answer the phone. So he spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort without success. The tragedy is that the only relationship he had was with a woman who killed him. So in the end, how old is he? 35 years old. Since 2019 until his incarceration, Alexander Pasternak claims to be a communal agent of Green Space. A co-worker described him as follows. He could not work alone, head in the air. He did not pay attention to the material. Calm, he did not like reproach. An assistant to the mayor adds he was clumsy, limited, and unable to make a decision. He is someone who changes easily, who speaks easily, who answers questions easily, except when I try to explore the sexual sphere. When I have someone in expertise, or an examination for sexual nature facts, I always explore his sexuality. At what age did he start masturbation? How does he practice? It is extremely important to make an exhaustive evaluation. The problem is that he categorically refused. They explore what happened exactly with the victim. How did he come to kill her? Why? We could obviously suspect when I met him. The victim was found naked. He himself recognized that he had a short BC and that after strangling her, he had laid on her body to caress her breasts. So there was a sexual dimension that seemed obvious to me. So when I tried to explore his motivations, his sexual implications, he came up with the theory of the white hole. The white hole, saying I have a white hole, I don't remember it anymore. Which was not satisfactory and not coherent because when he was questioned by investigators, he described the scene in detail without mentioning oblivion. He never specified that he had an oblivion, an amnesia of the scene. Likewise, when he is questioned in front of the judge, he explains in detail what happened, that he strangled her, that he undressed her, that in the fight, he unbuttoned and lowered his shorts. So there was no amnesia that stood out. There, in front of me, he plays the card of amnesia. In fact, he agrees to answer all the questions except that of his sexuality. I wonder because the question that arises is if there are sexual deviations when he watches movies, videos. Does he watch classic sexual intercourse or rape simulations? Does he watch sexual intercourse with young children? What interests him? What makes him vibrate? Is it his violent sexual intercourse or something else? It is essential to look for possible sexual deviations. So the fact that he refuses to talk about it says something too. There is still the question of an underlying sexual deviation. We wanted to be recognized for his sexual violence and the mobile phone that was probably that he had killed Mrs. Weber to rape her. He never wanted to recognize it. On the other hand, it was legal medicine that brought it. When we are going to address the sexual dimension of these acts, especially rape, it will be complicated for him to talk about it. More because he has trouble saying things because we have the impression that sex is something very taboo for him and that it costs him to talk about it. But he talks about it because if I ask him the question, he will answer it. And when the judge of instruction will question him about it, it will be exactly the same. That is, he will not elude the question, he will answer it. We see that he is in emotion when he talks about it. We see that he knows that what he has done is a deviant act. And he is afraid. He is afraid of the judgment of the other on the deviance of his act. The Nancy's prison has this particularity, it is that there is an L reserved for the perpetrators of sexual offenses. And a follow-up has been put in place within this prison for the perpetrators of sexual offenses. And Mr. Pasternak has been very quickly asked for medical care, for psychological care. And it is in the context of his follow-up that it will be suggested to him to write on paper what he had a lot of trouble saying out loud. And so, indeed, he will lay on the paper a little bit what happened. He will talk about his fantasies which remained in a state of fantasy. And he will talk about this day where he met Mrs. Weber, where he raped and killed her. And he will tell the story of this scene and during a cell search will be discovered his prose, immediately transmitted to Mrs. the Judge of Instruction who will question him shortly after on this discovery. The letter which signs the confessions of Alexander Pasternak is entitled The Tuesday of the Rape of the Corpse and His Killing. Alexander Pasternak evokes a repressed desire for years for his neighbor Sigrid Weber. He writes, I was a teenager at the time. I watched him on his long tan chair, in his swimsuit stretching his beautiful legs. Then in the next paragraph he recounts the day of the crime. It was a Tuesday of July. I was wondering how to sleep. I thought and I said to myself, at the Gondar farm there is a dead corner. It was the perfect place. He himself does not understand why he took the action. He was very scared seeing the capacity of violence that he could have in him. We have the impression that what happened is an accumulation of frustration and accumulation of rejection because he tried throughout his life to have relationships with women, and it is certainly this accumulation that made that day Mr. Pasternak committed a great violence. I do not think that he took the action in an opportunistic way. When I asked him about the vision that he had of the victim, he explained that he found this woman pretty. It was a sporty blonde. He found her pretty. They talked about it at his house with his mother. This woman had the reputation of wanting to be younger than her age, to have relationships with married men. She had the reputation of being a sexually active woman. I think he must have said that if she multiplies the relationships, maybe it will work. He thought about it regularly. I do not think that he ran into her quite by chance the day he killed her. I think he tried to get in touch with her. She must have sent him for a walk, as it always happened in the past with all the girls he tried with. I think he did not manage to control himself. It broke a cable. The rage of all the previous fights he had must have come out. I think it was the fight of too much. That's what must have put him in a state of considerable rage. He must have thought about all his downfalls, that he lived, that he wiped. He explains that he did it in the context of a drive. It was a drive and he had been fomenting it for a while, so we can assume that it's been several weeks to several months. In the early 2000s, he had met a walker in the forest and he had already had this drive, but he had managed to slow her down. He explains that he really wanted to catch this woman and strangle her until she died. He had managed to control his gesture. What happened between 2000 and 2019 is that in the meantime his grandmother died. He explains that there was a very fusional relationship with her and that following the death of his grandmother, he began to lose control and the drives became more and more important. The passage of time for me is simply due to a mixture of several factors. An extreme social isolation, someone who has not had friends since his most tender childhood. You should know that he told us that his comrades also made fun of him regularly because he was extremely shy and fat. He lived a whole childhood without friends. He was not very close to his brother. They did not have the same interests. So he is someone who has always lived alone. He tried with all his strength to meet a woman by going to balls on dating sites. It never worked. He told us that he had never had anyone to trust. I think it is this extreme social isolation that caused frustrations. Social frustrations, sexual frustrations that made him take action. Let the accused in. Mr. Pasternak, when did you decide to follow Sigrid Weber, your victim? When I saw her from afar, I turned around and I found myself in front of her. What were your intentions? She raped him. Mr. Pasternak, from the facts for which he was convicted, we can call him a sexual murderer. Dr. Alexander Barata, psychiatrist expert. And overall, there are two profiles of sexual murderers described in the literature. It is very important to make the distinction between the profiles of murderers, sexual murderers, and choleric murderers. He does not have a particular personality profile, or he can be a psychopath. In any case, he can be inserted socially or not. He is known for his violent antecedents. These are people who are quite violent. In any case, they have no difficulty in their relationship with people. It is often unoptimized. It is not premeditated at all. But in him, there is no sexual deviation. He does it more to humiliate the person he hits, more than by sexual perversion. Unlike sadistic sexual killers, where the profile is generally selected in advance, it must correspond to the sexual criteria, aesthetic criteria that the woman likes. Why is it important to distinguish the two? Because the risk of recidivism will not be the same in either case. In the case of the sadistic sexual killer, the risk of recidivism is much higher, especially on the same modality of murder or rape. Alexander Pasternak clearly presents a profile of a sadistic sexual killer. This is also the kind of profile found in some serial killers. If there is recidivism in him, it will not be a theft, it will not be violence on a third person. There is a risk of having sexual violence again, even a sexual murder again. The social reassertion of Mr. Pasternak is problematic. The motivations of the homicide seem to be underpinned by perverse sadistic fantasies. The little evolution of the personality over time exaggerates a little more its social danger. On average, the rate of recidivism in a homicide is a rare phenomenon, evaluated at 4.5%. For sexual homicides committed on the occasion of a rape or by a serial killer, the reiteration is higher, more than 15%. We find some common points between Jeffrey Dahmer, the famous serial killer who made the subject of a current television series, and Mr. Pasternak Alexander, especially a profile of a particular personality where social interactions are largely compromised. These are isolated people who were very early identified as weird by the people around them. Weird, isolated, with very particular interests and who clearly have problems getting into a relationship with peers and initiating intimate relationships. In both cases, we find emotional coldness and also particular sexual concerns. In Jeffrey Dahmer's case, there is an obvious sexual sadism that comes out, especially when we document the expertise that he benefited from in the United States. We still find common points with sexual deviations, inhibition, anxious introversion, contact problems. Mr. Pasternak, you never tried to approach Mrs. Weber in a classic way. I tried last fall, but I gave up. I was too shy. When we learn about psychiatric expertise, we get the impression that we are dealing with a real delay bomb, a potential killer or rapist. In any case, it is counterbalanced by all the elements that we have in the other, that we have in the case. On the one hand, Mr. Pasternak never talked about himself in front of justice. No crime, of course, can be blamed on him before that day. There were no signs before then in his childhood, in his adolescence, that can suggest that we are in the presence of someone who is violent or perverse. Mr. Pasternak is far from the potential or future serial killer that the psychiatric expert can depict. Quite simply because, apart from what the expert says, there is nothing. There is nothing that allows us to say that Mr. Pasternak will one day recede or that Mr. Pasternak, when he is released one day from detention, will talk about himself again. In the end, Mr. Pasternak is worrying because he is more an old boy from the village, and yet he can turn out to be really ultra-violent with morbid impulses. What is disturbing with Mr. Pasternak is indeed his manly look, his look of an old boy, simple, smiling, and what we see of him and what he is able to show when he talks about his impulses, when he talks about David, which are frightening. And what is disturbing with Mr. Pasternak in relation to this, in relation to his fantasies and his impulses, is that if he is not treated in prison and if he can be treated, that is the question that arises. It is a profile that we do not want to find after his period of security in the streets in 22 years. When he concluded the interview with me, he clearly told me that it was not the first time that I would be in court. So I noted the sentence in the report. He told me, at the end of the interview, it is not the first judgment that I will have. That's where the interview ended. According to the requisitions of the Attorney General, Alexander Pasternak was sentenced to 30 years of criminal detention after a period of security of 20 years. He also has an obligation to follow care for a period of 10 years. Fortunately, it is not so frequent that we are placed in custody. But he is confident. He explains to me that he knows what he is getting at. He had already been audited as a witness previously, like many others in the case. He explains to me that he knows why the investigators turned to him, but that there is nothing to do about it. He did have a contact with the victim, but nothing more, and that the hearing will go on. Well, Mr. Cornaro, we have video surveillance images. We see you on the night of the events, in front of Fabrice's house. You give him a flat tire. Then you wait for him and follow him. We have all this on video, sir. What happened next? Of course, he stopped because of his flat tire. I picked him up and we talked. I wanted to know where he was with Aura Lee. But very quickly, it degenerated. We fought, and that's all. I went home, I had a bloody nose, and I had broken ribs. And then? It's not your story, sir. I advise you to think well during the night. And it's finally the next day that it unfolds. I find him in the hallways of the police hotel in Metz. Very quickly, we make the point of his initiative to tell me, here, I thought and I want to tell the truth. That's it. Yes, I followed Fabrice. But I didn't want to kill him. I wanted to be explained. But it degenerated, it went around. He told me he had slept with Aurélie. He went out on foot, but I managed to catch him. And I hit him until my arm hurt, I swear. And then I put a rope in his car, and I set it on fire. Matthew Cornereau is incarcerated. But it's going badly. In detention, he has only one idea: to commit suicide. I meet him at Metz's house, in the service where he's someone who's rather thin. No sign of a cure. He's clean on him, his hair discolored. We easily get into a relationship with him. He's going to talk to us. His speech is consistent. On the other hand, it's also an element that struck me. When I meet him, he's just been put on trial for killing his partner's partner. And when I ask him, "Are you still in a relationship with her?" he says, "Yes, but she's still my wife." It strikes us because there's a pragmatic reality. Judicial consequences will follow. So the ability he has, at that moment, to take a step back on the seriousness of the events is quite limited. He's going to be rather self-centered. The affections are going to be mainly centered on the consequences of his actions for himself. He's not going to talk much about the victim. He still has a hard time, even if we give him a hard time, to be able to consider the consequences of his actions for himself. In other words, it's the notion of guilt. When we talk about the consequences of his actions, Mr. Cornereau evokes the victim spontaneously, but with an emotional detachment that is present during all the expertise operations. Concerning the evocation of the victim's body after the beatings, he says, "I threw up on myself. I peed on myself. I put my body in the car. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I still wanted to throw up." Mr. Cornereau, when we look a little bit at what he did in the wake of his passing, how did it go? He didn't have a depressive state. He regained his emotional, sexual life, an ability to distance the gravity of the actions. It didn't affect his functioning. It's a classic. To understand the personality of Matthew Cornereau, the judge of instruction grates on the side of his childhood. As often, Matthew Cornereau was not spoiled. At 1 year old, his father abandons everyone, and his mother plunges into a deep depression. And it is his maternal grandparents who will raise him. It will take several years for his mother to recover, after which she meets a new man, with whom she has 3 other children. So he has links within the recomposed family. What is quite significant is that this father-in-law, who could have taken the paternal figure, did not do so. On the contrary, because he turned out to be very violent, especially in the educational system. And when we mention the notion of violence with Mr. Cornereau, in his childhood, he had a tendency to minimize it, even deny it. So his mother was on guard. But it's not really her who raised him. It's the grandparents who took care of it. This was Matthew Cornereau's childhood, raised with a lot of love from his grandparents, with his biological mother and his stepfather occupying, as much as possible, this role of parent, but hard. And then with brothers and sisters. And finally, it appears at all times, and Matthew Cornereau always tells me, everyone was doing their life, and did not really care about the life of the brotherhood or the life of others. Matthew Cornereau is very quiet about his youth. Finally, when he tells me about his life, he tells me about his life from the moment when he gets into a very young couple. At 18, 20 years old, barely, with his daughter's mother. On a sentimental level, Matthew Kerneru evokes a first girlfriend at the age of 17. At 20, he meets Aura Lee, who is only 15 years old. Matthew Kerneru speaks of a fusional relationship, and 8 years later, their daughter is born. If we listen to Mr. Kerneru, he sells us a delicate life. He explains to us that there is no physical violence, there is no psychological violence. As for the conflict, I quote, "No, there is never any." And so indeed, Matthew Kerneru probably idealizes his marital relationship with Aura Lee. But besides that, there was jealousy on both sides. There was an obvious form of affective dependence between one and the other, and this dependence is reciprocal. It is undoubtedly a toxic relationship. More than Empress, it is more an affective dependence. What he asks us, especially what he explains to us, is that there were two separations that are significantly different. Because the first, it is he who makes the decision to leave. So it is he who controls the fact that he leaves his partner. It is in 2018, because he has just lost his job, he has met someone else, and so he decides to break up. And in the end, it doesn't go as he wants. And then he goes back to see Aura Lee. Then he explains to us that, well, no, in the end, I loved her, she loved me, so we got together. While the second relationship, the one that took place a little before the events, there it is in a very different context, since in fact it is Mrs. Doe who decides to leave him. After an infidelity of Matthew Kerneru, the couple separates and Mr. Kerneru leaves the house to his wife. The young woman then begins a relationship with Fabrice Metzler, a co-worker. By learning this relationship, Matthew Kerneru explains having had a crisis of anxiety. He will evoke a shock, a betrayal, and a nightmare. I'll go to Aura Lee when your daughter won't be there, then that's all, if that's what you want. So he's going to bend to that. For him, he's not looking for a story, he understands. He says to himself, it will pass. Mr. Alexander Bernard, lawyer of the family of Fabrice Metzler. So Matthew Kerneru has this particularity of never having and never leaving this story aside. It's going to become something obsessive for him. He's going to throw a kind of canvas like that and remain constantly aware and become obsessed with the idea of this relationship that is appearing between Fabrice and Aura Lee. For 3 weeks, Matthew Kerneru ruminates his hatred of Fabrice. And on November 20th, 2021, he decides to go see him. He wants an explanation. For him, he always considers that Aura Lee and her companion Dr. Guillaume Vlaminck, psychiatric expert. And so he can't accept that Mr. Fabrice Metzler is living his life with Aura Lee. So for him, it's always his object. And the way he can consider that this is no longer the case, in fact, he doesn't consider it. For him, he still doesn't agree that there was a separation. At the narcissistic level, the emergence of an old wound with a feeling of humiliation could trigger the passage to Mr. Kerneru's act. The need to know, to understand what is impossible to imagine for him and can put him in a state of important psychological distress. Namely the fact of being so easily excluded, so easily replaced, even abandoned. After doing a stratagem to be able to discuss with the victim, he will explain, I quote, "He wanted to replace me, it started to make me angry." And what would have led to the first access of anger is that according to him, the victim would have entered into intimate details of what he could do with Aura Lee. I quote, "He told me that he had taken her in bed, that he had stuffed her in his mouth. It drove me crazy and I hit him." So what Mr. Kerneru explains to us at this point is that he finally realizes that we are no longer just in the friendly, even effective relationship for which he is potentially likely to understand, but that there are real carnal relationships and that he has lost his place in the marital bed. And on top of that, he explains to him that he replaces him, and he replaces him well, even better than him. And at that point, on a narcissistic level, for him, there is an inability to consider that. And from what he explains to us, it is from that moment on that there is a decline and that he is no longer able to control himself. But beyond the family sphere, it is indeed not someone who can present a major danger. Maitre Alexander Bernard, lawyer of the family of Fabrice Nometzla. Mr. Bernard, you have the floor for the civil party. Madam, you have had a lunatic behavior. We ask you if you knew that Matthew had assassinated Fabrice before the police questioned him. And you answer next to him. I find it amazing, madam. There was no emotion. From time to time, eyes that rose a little to the sky. There was no shadow of a real and sincere emotion. In any case, we did not feel it. We did not feel the slightest empathy that could come out. It was chilling. We could feel that she was not clear and that there was nothing to draw from it. Her words were particularly expected. And at least the only thing that everyone can be satisfied with is that she recognized having a moral responsibility in all this. What is certain is that she knew more than she told us. And for what reason? We have absolutely no explanation for that. Matthew Cornuro presents flaws of identity construction that he tries to hide, as well as traits of personality dependent and obsessive. If he seems to regret his gesture and feel guilty, a social judicial follow-up can be proposed with a psychological or psychiatric follow-up. If Matthew Cornuro presents no psychiatric or psychological illness, it remains that his danger exists and will exist if he finds himself in the same circumstances. There is a real work to be done so that he can repair the flaws of his personality. In particular, probably through psychotherapy, things like that, so that we can be sure that, yes, he will never recover. The only concern he still has is not to rebuild himself later. It's a bit like hooking up the wagons with his daughter, hoping that she will forgive him, hoping to have a perfect relationship later when she comes and not to have definitively lost this only link he still has with the past. Matthew Cornuro is sentenced by the Court of Assises of Douai to 30 years of criminal reclusion without a period of safety. The premeditation has not been retained and he has not appealed for his sentence.